What if I told you that an Australian inline-six engine once sent General Motors executives into panic mode? So much so, they tried to bury it. Not a supercar, not a mighty V8, but the Holden 202, an unassuming power plant with the potential to shake the global automotive order. Beneath the humble hoods of old Holdens lurked a mechanical rebellion, one that remained shackled in the shadows for decades. Designed in Melbourne, banned in Detroit, and quietly erased from official history by its own parent company. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the shocking truth behind the engine GM tried to forget, from its technical brilliance, racing triumphs, to the global conspiracy that kept it from taking the world stage. Are you ready to uncover Australia's greatest mechanical secret? It all began in 1963, when Holden introduced the 138 cubic inch red motor in the EH model, a defining step in Australia's own mechanical journey. These weren't flashy V8s like in America. This was a grassroots engineering effort to build a durable, reliable engine tailored for the harsh Australian landscape. In the years that followed, the red motor evolved, 149, 161, then 173 cubic inches, each version refining performance and durability. But in 1969, a true leap forward emerged, the birth of the Holden 202. Under the guidance of legendary engineer Ian Tate, Holden's team achieved the seemingly impossible, increasing displacement without changing the engine's physical dimensions. By applying advanced metallurgical techniques, they created thinner cylinder walls without compromising strength. As a result, Holden kept the same engine block size while pushing displacement to 202 cubic inches, or 3.3 liters. This allowed Holden to retain the same engine block size while pushing displacement to 202 cubic inches, or 3.3 liters. A revolutionary milestone for Australian engineering, but also the moment Detroit began paying very close attention to what was happening in Melbourne. That attention quickly turned into concern. At General Motors headquarters in the US, executives began to ask, were their Australian engineers pushing too far beyond what was authorized? Initially, GM viewed the Holden 202 as a localized project with no global ambitions. But when Holden vehicles equipped with the 202 were sent to the US for internal testing, everything changed. The results showed the 202 was not only shockingly durable, it outperformed several American V8s in stress and fuel economy tests. Panic began to spread quietly. Internal documents from the early 1970s reveal emergency meetings between Detroit and Melbourne. GM couldn't accept the troubling truth. An engine from a small regional division in Australia was overshadowing its American flagships. What followed was a series of deliberate decisions. Limit the 202's applications, cancel export plans, kill off high-performance variants, and loosen production standards to quietly undermine its reputation. The 202 had once been an engineering breakthrough, but to GM, it became a threat that had to be contained before it slipped out of control. On the surface, the Holden 202 was just a 3.3-liter inline-six, producing around 135 horsepower. Not exactly awe-inspiring compared to the V8 monsters of the era. But once you peel back the technical layers, a different truth emerges. The 202 featured a 7-main bearing bottom-end design, while most rivals made do with 4. This gave the crankshaft superior stability, reducing flex at high RPM and creating a platform so robust that many mechanics called it bulletproof for performance builds. Its cylinder walls were unusually thick, allowing overbores beyond 230 cubic inches without compromising integrity. an almost unheard-of trait in mainstream engines. Even more impressive was the head design, with high-efficiency port geometry optimized without the use of modern CFD simulations. Independent testing revealed airflow figures that shouldn't have been possible using 1970s technology. But these very strengths made it a thorn in the side of GM's global hierarchy. And rather than elevate the Holden 202 into a global icon, GM chose to quietly undermine it from within. Upgrades were delayed, airflow was restricted using narrow intake manifolds. Camshafts were oddly detuned. Tests showed the 202 could easily reach 170 to 180 horsepower with simple tweaks. Yet GM demanded power be kept under 140, not for durability as claimed, but to avoid overshadowing American V8s. Internal documents even suggest deliberate inconsistencies in production tolerances, causing performance to vary between engine batches. The goal was to turn a mechanical masterpiece into a just good enough engine, adequate for the local market, but not too good to threaten GM's global product hierarchy. The clearest suppression came in 1974, when Holden proposed an EFI-equipped version of the 202. It could have made Australia a tech leader within GM, but the project was killed after a single meeting. The official reason: unfavorable market conditions. Meanwhile, 202-powered race cars were beginning to shine. And as the 2002 began to shine on the racetrack, GM's efforts to keep it under wraps started to unravel. No longer confined to dyno charts or lab reports, the Holden 202 now entered a place where the truth couldn't be hidden: the racetrack. In the early 1970s, while V8s still dominated in Australia, independent race teams, known as privateers, began to notice something strange. With just a few tweaks, the 202 could become a serious contender. Peter Brock, an Australian racing legend, proved it with his Tirana fitted with triple SU carburetors, pushing nearly 240 horsepower out of an engine GM officially rated at 135. The most shocking moment came at the 1972 Bathurst race. In wet conditions, Harry Firth's Tirana GTR XU won, with the 202 engine beat out multiple V8s to claim victory. The news reached Detroit, and not everyone was thrilled. Within months, racing rules changed. Cars with small, efficient engines, like the 202, were slapped with extra weight or configuration limits. Even under new rule restrictions, the Holden 202 kept winning, forcing competitors and GM itself to acknowledge its true strength. But with that success came even greater resistance, because once the Holden 202 began crossing Australian borders and threatening the dominance of GM's V8s, the corporations stepped in. In 1971, 320 Holden vehicles equipped with the 202 engine were sent to GM's testing facility in Michigan. A retired engineer later revealed that in real-world tests, the 202 outperformed several core V8s in fuel efficiency and durability, leaving GM executives visibly shaken. The issue? General Motors had invested millions in V8 development across the US and Europe. They couldn't let a secondary six-cylinder from Australia jeopardize their global strategy. A leaked 1972 memo outlined the plan. The 202 would be regionalized: no expansion, no upgrades, no exports. The EFI version was scrapped. High-performance packages were cancelled. Plans for international touring races were quietly shut down. The touring project was cancelled, the EFI version scrapped, and every global path was blocked. Yet while GM executives tried to erase the 2020 from the future, a small community quietly began preserving its past. From small garages in rural Australia to secretive groups in Tokyo and Berlin, the Holden 202 wasn't revived by corporations, but by pure mechanical passion. At first, it was just a basic engine, cheap, easy to fix, overlooked. But over time, it became a forgotten icon, and eventually, a mechanical treasure. A numbers-matching original 202 block can now fetch over $8,000, nearly 10 times what it was worth 15 years ago. The most sought-after version? The rare double blue stripe engines from late 1972, which have sold for over $12,000 to serious collectors. The 202 community is tight-knit and secretive, sharing knowledge like code breakers in private forums and underground groups. But the most striking fact? Many of them aren't even Australian. They come from Japan, Europe, the US. Those who discovered what GM once tried to deny, the 202 is the real deal. Beyond its collectible value, the Holden 202 has become a foundational learning platform for mechanics and engineers in Australia and beyond. Its 7-main bearing bottom end, once seen as overkill, is now celebrated as a benchmark for durability and torque handling. Many modern inline sixes still draw inspiration from the 202's engineering principles. The aftermarket for the 2020 is not just alive, it's thriving. Brands like Yellowterra, Wade Engineering, and Ice Ignition continue producing high-performance cams, CNC machined heads, and electronic ignition systems for an engine that hasn't been manufactured in decades. More impressively, the 202 is now found in international hot rod and custom builds, from Japan to the US. For many, the 202 represents the spirit of a mechanical golden age, simple, durable, tunable, and soulful. The Holden 202 may have been cast aside by the very corporation that birthed it, but over time, it has endured, standing as proof of the lasting power of pure engineering. The Holden 202 isn't just an engine. It's Australia's mechanical declaration, suppressed by the very people who built it, yet kept alive by passionate car lovers across the world. From Melbourne's labs to Bathurst's racetrack, from humble garages to global custom car shows, the 202 has traveled a path few engines ever do. It proves that real engineering never goes out of style, and true passion can't be silenced. If you've ever driven a classic Holden or heard the roar of a 202, share your story in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more hidden mechanical secrets like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. There are still many untold stories waiting to be revealed.